Poinsettia, Chapter 19. It was cloudy and wet. The rain came down, patting against all that stood in its way to the ground. Under a large tarp stood a large group of mourners about a freshly dug grave. The priest stood behind the headstone, head bowed as the mourners threw flowers into the hole. Nearby, on a grassy hill, atop the stone mausoleum stood Angus, in full traditional attire, standing tall as he played a tune of parting on his bagpipes. Despite the gloomy afternoon, Gavin still covered himself. No one was the wiser to think he was protecting himself from any sunlight. But the bitter cold and freezing rain was certainly enough cause for many to be bundled up. He wore a heavy, dark bumble coat, dark glasses, and a top hat, a scarf nuzzling against his cheeks. He had his hair tied in the back and resting over his neck beneath the coat's collar. On his hands he wore leather gloves. If not for his creamy face, one would think a mere shadow stood in his place. Across from him stood the poor Mrs. Laura Borders, dressed in black with a black lace veil over her face. The group consisted of many friends and family, and the members of the board as well. Except one, the late Mr. Haggard. The group began to disperse. Laura brought out her kerchief and dabbed at her eyes beneath the veil. Gavin came beside her and gently put an arm about her. "Your husband was a good man." "This music makes me want to cry harder. It's so final. The sheer reality that I'm standing at my husband's funeral." "Angus is on the hill. Shall I order him to stop?" She lowered her head. "No. It's the respectful thing to do, to play for him. I appreciate his respects." She turned to Gavin and buried her face into his chest. "I don't understand it. Who could do this to him? He loved everybody. And now? Why now?" "I know it's not a very Merry Christmas present, Laura," Gavin replied. "But Angus and I are here for you if you need anything. Don't hesitate to call on us. It would only be our honor." "You're so kind. But it's not just the season, Lord McIntyre." "Then what is it?" She brought a hand to her face and nuzzled into his coat. "I'm pregnant," he whispered. She nodded with a choked sob. "And did he know?" She shook her head. "I was going to wait and tell him when he came home. It was going to be my gift to him this year. We've been trying for years. How could this happen now? What am I going to do?" "You're going to be fine," Gavin assured strongly. "I promise you that. You will not have to struggle alone. I told you, Angus and I would look after you. It's the least we could do for a friend's wife. Besides, nobody should be alone at a time like this." He paused and frowned. "Laura, would you feel better staying with me?" "I can't. But I can't face that house full of memories right now either. And his money will only last so long. I could lose everything. I'm such a shameful wife. Why did he ever marry a klutz like me?" He tipped her head up with a finger. "Laura, he didn't marry you for grand wits or simple beauty. You are smart and lovely. But the reason he married you was because he loved you. I'm sure, even where he is now, be it Heaven, Summerland, Valhalla, Elysian Fields, or Tirnanog, he still loves you. That will never change. You're welcome to stay with me in my home, or I can help you to remain where you are. You could do both. I can't bear to just leave you alone at such a fragile time, especially in your condition now." "You are such a kind man, your lordship." "Gavin, please don't be so formal. We both loved him very much. Let's know each other as friends. I am Gavin." "Gavin." She blushed deeply and averted her gaze, trembling a little. He cleared his throat, feeling nervous. He had forgotten how his vampire gaze made women weak in the knees. Are you sure I would not be imposing? Not at all. It might be a little fun to have a lady to dote over. He blushed a little. Oh, forgive me. That sounded so insensitive. No, it's all right. Thank you so very, very much. Up on the hill, Angus ended his tune, lowering the bagpipe for a moment to restore his lungs. He closed his eyes, turning his head upwards towards the fallen rain that matted down his hair in wetness and made his clothes cling to him. Lady Clementine, my dear Caradwyn, look after him. He was a bonny good man. Down came the gavel as Gavin stood at the head of the table. I would like to start this evening for a moment of silence for our departed Mr. Borders and Mr. Haggard. And indeed it came, with the other board members lowering their heads in respects. That said and done, Gavin lifted his head and examined the faces and empty seats. Lord McCairn, your lordship, did you bring the items I have asked of you? Yes, I have all the receipts and documentation. He slid them across the table, having Gavin chase them before they could fall off the table. The vampire glared at him, but said nothing about such a childish motion. He sat down and opened the manila folder, examining the contents. Everyone was silent as he did so. Gavin sat back and sighed, putting the papers down. Lord McCairn smirked. You see, everything pans out. Gavin frowned. Indeed, there were receipts and checks and balances for everything the hospital spent over the last 3 years. There were other folders as well, but that was the most recent. I would like to take these home and review them. You will honestly sit through 3 years' worth of checks and balances, Lord McIntyre? Lord McCairn asked. Any reason why I shouldn't? He retorted, giving him a suspicious glare. Not at all. But in 3 years, that's a lot of paperwork. Surely it would take forever to go through it. That isn't your concern. What should be your concern is how an organization, in 3 years of doing absolutely nothing different, could be on the verge of bankruptcy and closure. The only difference, Lord McCairn, is that you were appointed to the board as the treasurer, the one in charge of how the finances would be used. Therefore, it is only common sense that the burden and suspicion be placed upon your head. You have no proof that I have done anything wrong, Lord McCairn spat defensively. Never said I did. But if you have done the best that could possibly be done, then you have nothing to worry about now, do you? He smirked wickedly. Don't get so defensive. It makes you look so guilty. How can you talk to people like that? I don't care what any trust or agreement says. You can't be throwing around your weight and insult the board members. I can do as I please, Lord McCairn, Gavin replied simply. Do not try to intimidate me with your loud and gaping mouth. You cannot accomplish bringing me to my knees to kiss your feet. So do not even bother. As far as all of you are concerned, I'm the god of the board, and everyone obeys my final decisions. You are the quickest one amongst these men to open your hole and spew out large amounts of manure. Perhaps it's because of your lack of years compared to them. Lack of years. I dare say, sir, that you look younger than I. There's not a gray hair on your head. There's not a wrinkle on your face. You look like a mere youth, a boy not even hitting his 3rd decade. Gavin chuckled. I appreciate the words of good fortune, Lord McCairn. I love when people see a youth where I stand. I love being seen as a young man. I love it when people believe I'm younger than I truly am. And how old are you? Lord McCairn demanded. Well, that is not the matter of this meeting. Does anyone have a copy of the minutes? That was Mr. Border's job, one of the members stated. Are they not stored here? He always took them home with him. He wanted to be sure nobody ever tampered with them. Gavin frowned. Really? When did he start doing this, Mr. O'Brien? Mr. O'Brien paled and sat back, almost as if he were afraid that Gavin would strike him. A few years back? I see. He stood, That'll be all. He smacked down the gavel and picked up the box of folders, placing the recent one on top and carrying it effortlessly from the room. This had Lord McCarran blinking with utter confusion, and he made it known when Gavin left the room. It took 2 people to bring that box in here, and he's carrying it like it weighs nothing. He may look weak, but Lord McIntyre is a very strong man, Mr. O'Brien smiled. Pompous bastard! Outside, Gavin took proud steps down the hall, stopping a moment and closing his eyes. Danny, go to bed! Danny popped out her head. How do you do that? You know very well how. It's late. You should be in bed. You having insomnia again? I'm just a nighttime person, I suppose. Maybe I'm a vampire. He had to smile at that and let out a small chuckle. Dear child, I don't think you've quite hit the point of vampire. It takes more than simply being awake all night. I'm not afraid of dying. He shuddered. I sure am. He then chuckled. So even that has nothing to do with being a vampire. Anyway, let's not talk about it anymore. One of the sisters might walk by and overhear and totally misunderstand. Danny nodded, bringing a finger to her lips to symbolize a hush. Can I help you carry that? They are very heavy, he replied. They don't look heavy. I'm much stronger than normal people, Gavin whispered. If I gave this to you, it might break your little back, and your arms would fall off. Then you'd be armless, and we'd have to put in sticks, like a little snowman. She laughed. You're so silly, Mr. Gavin. He smiled warmly. Don't stay up too late. At least, don't stay out in these halls. You'll be warmer in a room. Okay. I'll go soon. I just want to walk a little more. Maybe I can get tired. Do you need me to make you something warm to drink? He asked. She shook her head confidently. I'm not thirsty or that cold right now. Are you going home? Indeed. I have to drop off these folders. Wow, you'll be up all night. He chuckled. Well, I plan to be really ready to work on them after I visit my wife. Oh, you're going. She leaned in and whispered. There? There? The cemetery? That's where she is, right? He gave her a sad and thoughtful smile. Yes, it's been a little while since I visited her. What do you do up there? I like to walk. She loved walking with me, so I always walk that same path. I always feed the birds in the park, even if none are present, since she always did it, and I deliver a letter to her. Danny smiled her innocent, youthful smile. I bet she really loves that. You're a really nice guy, vampire or not. If I wasn't sick, I'd wish that I could find a man that loved me that much. Never hurts to continue to dream, Danny, he replied sadly. Now I must be off. Remember what I said, and get some rest.